This is Train of Thought, a podcast where we interview upcoming, previous, and maybe other dimensional members of the Laugh Tracks Comedy Showcase. Tonight on the show, we have local comedian, author, cat parent, and did I mention author? It's Dan Kapr.
Hello.
Dan, can you tell everybody who you are and why you're here today?
I'm Dan Kapr. I did stand-up comedy in Baltimore and elsewhere in the country for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's how I know Jake.
That is true.
And I'm a Baltimore person.
Baltimore person, Baltimore podcaster. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Baltimore author. But you were not always a Baltimore person. We'll get into how hard it was to research for this in a bit. But I was able to at least confirm from LinkedIn that you went to school in New York. Are you from New York?
Yes. So my family moved to New York when I was 8.
Oh, okay.
So originally from New Jersey.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to put the pins on the map.
Yes.
New Jersey to New York to Maryland?
No. So there was New Jersey to New York.
Yeah.
And then college in a different part of New York. And then to outside of Philly for a couple years.
Okay, so then you went to Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And then
back to New York.
Okay.
And then to Baltimore.
Yes, and then
to Pittsburgh for a couple of years, and then back to Baltimore.
Back to Baltimore. Okay, because I was like, okay, I know he's been here, here, and here, but the thing is, you've done an incredibly good job, wiping your social media everywhere. I found more about, and stop me if you know her, Danielle Kapr. She's an author with the YMCA doing feminist literature.
That's my ex-wife. So that's.
I forgot that
that's right.
You were married to a Danielle.
Danielle.
Yeah,
yes, it was very cringy. We were aware of how cringy it was when it happened. But
I mean, listen, as a person who dates other men, that's always the biggest concern. I could not date another Jake or anyone with my father's name. That's completely off the board. But she turns up more than you do, and it's more past stuff from 2017 and such.
I'm probably better than her at wiping my internet presence.
It's impressive how far back I cannot find you.
I swear I'm a real person, but I can tell you why.
Yeah, how exactly? That's what I'm more curious about. We all have our reasons. We don't want to be stuck on
well,
the hot dogs in a hot car that God forgot. I don't blame you.
No, this is fun because it relates to some of the stuff that I know you wanted to ask me about anyway. Because I know we'll get into this, but obviously I grew up in a very religious, conservative, fundamentalist Christian environment.
Yeah.
And I was very deep in it, and I was supposed to be a pastor, and I was kind of doing that. I was on that path for a while.
Yeah.
Went to a Christian college, got a ministry/philosophy degree, and went to a seminary. And then after I decided to walk away from all of that, and we moved to Baltimore mainly for reasons having to do with that. And I started doing stand-up comedy. It became very clear to me that if you look me up online, all you see is this old all this stuff related to my career in the church.
This is so funny because now it's come full circle because a lot of it is related to your books, which are still about church, Jesus, Bible, etc.
There used to be a MySpace account from one of the youth groups that I led.
Oh, lordy. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, when I started taking comedy seriously, which was a year or two in.
So then that would have been 2015?
Yeah, about then. Yeah, I think it was 2015. And I made myself a website, and I started going through, and I was like, all right, I want to get as much of this off the internet as I can. And it involved things like taking down old blogs.
Okay.
Untagging myself in so many pictures on Facebook.
Yeah.
And yeah, just various things like that. Finding old social media posts that were
it was an
Bible verses
effort.
And stuff like that. And I was yeah, I know. I mean, part of it was for comedy, and part of it was mental health.
It's valid. Mental health is valid. We all have it, but I get that. I use Facebook memories as an excuse every day to purge my past self, to kill my inner child, because he should not have been allowed on the computer that unsupervised.
Yeah,
it's unsustainable.
I got very good at it because I wound up getting into the habit of doing a Google audit of myself every 6 months or so.
Okay.
And I also had Google Alerts set up for my name, and it
Ah,
wasn't pure vanity. It was in case something gets mentioned about me, I want to know if it's
exactly.
something weird that I don't want to be affiliated with.
Yeah, and like how it ties to who you are now and just like having a whole past life. I will say, I did find one remaining tweet out there from your Twitter account, and
Okay.
it's embedded in an article. And I want to read you the tweet, and I want you to see if you can tell me where it's from or what it's referencing. Wait, what the hell? I thought we were all changing every day. Why does the world keep getting more
Oh
horrifying?
yeah, that was something. So that was I used to be a shit poster on Twitter.
We all did. Yeah, that's the
And
shit
so
poster, the podcast host,
on
pipeline.
several occasions I got quoted in random list
Yeah.
articles, and that I think was something to do with underwear. People
Yes,
said
I
they
was
weren't. Yeah.
so hopeful you would remember. People aren't changing their underwear every day, and social media is judgy.
There's a few that are not. I haven't been able to find them. I did
Yeah.
not remove myself from them, but it made me really sad because some of them were so funny. There was some story in the news back in like 2016 or
Hmm.
17, and that scientists had discovered what they were calling a new continent. And I'm sure that was like an exaggeration.
It's a
It was just some new
yeah.
land. I forget what it was called. And so I made some stupid joke about how oh, Trump has already restricted immigration from it or whatever. And then the Miami Herald did an
Oh
article
God.
about the discovery of the thing,
Yeah.
like a legit article, and then they said some, however, just used it as an opportunity for jokes, and I got I got shamed in the Miami
So you've
Herald.
been called judgy, some however, and
Yeah.
that's been the fun part too, because like I used to get stuff quoted in like BuzzFeed a lot, and they never tell you either. They never tell you when they're stealing your content to embed in their pages. But now it's all gone because all of these websites like have stopped hosting embedded content, especially
Yes.
BuzzFeed. So it's super weird to like go through like even looking at that article, there are so many like this account does not exist anymore. And
Yes.
I think your account doesn't exist, so I think they must have copy pasted this one
Yeah.
directly.
There is still the CNN article,
Yeah.
which I only found out about because of the Google alerts.
Okay.
And I have a link to that one saved. I was in a CNN article that was about Richard Dreyfuss and Julia Louis Dreyfus.
Wait, okay, because I saw the thumbnail for that in the Google searching that I was doing. I'm like, this must be some weird, like, there's a caper who wrote this, and then they say the word Dan
No,
elsewhere.
it's
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 you?
it's literally an article about Julia Louis Dreyfus, and it was during an Emmy acceptance speech.
Mm-hmm.
She mentioned that I used to do a joke about this on stage, but she mentioned that her father had recently passed away,
Mm-hmm.
and all these idiots watching just assumed, oh, her last name is Louis Dreyfus. Her dad
Therefore,
must have been Richard
Richard.
Dreyfus. Richard Dreyfus is dead. Oh my God. And so all these people started sending messages to Richard Dreyfus to see if he was okay. So then he had to go on Twitter and say, I'm still
I'm still
alive.
here.
And
I'm.
I
I am not the father.
I made some joke about it, and then that the next day that all there was an article that was about Julie Louis Dreyfus and Richard Dreyfus, and then
Mm-hmm.
it was comedian Dan Marcy Caper because I was
Mm,
still married at that
yeah.
point. And it quoted my tweet, and I was like, "Oh my God, they think I'm a real comedian."
CNN approved, and I
CNN
mean,
said I was a comedian, so it's official
but
now.
the thing is, you were and or are, depending on how you are feeling about it
Yeah.
currently, a comedian because you did tour, you did Burbank, you
Yes.
did San Francisco Sketchfest.
Yes, that was a really fun one.
You also performed with one of the previous Power Rangers, and that
Yeah,
was your favorite comedy memory,
that's
and
one of them for sure.
the original Power Rangers specifically. And what is so wrong with the Mighty Morphin Rangers? That's what I want to know. Why are they so much worse than the original cast?
What's the original? It was the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Are they
That
the
was the
original?
first. Yeah, it
Then
was because the show came out when I was like 6 or 7,
okay.
and we were still living in New Jersey, and I
Yeah.
was obsessed with it.
I mean, yeah, it's a bunch of
Uh,
colorful people doing backflips.
right, and then they basically ride around in Transformers and have weapons that can
Yeah.
change
I thought
ways.
Mighty Morphin was the second series where they were like animals as well. Versus, I mean, I guess the first one they're animals, but
They
like
were, yeah.
Beast
There were
Force's
so many
Transformers.
iterations. I
That's true.
only, yeah, but I was a huge fan, and so yeah, the original Black Ranger,
Okay.
Walter Jones.
Okay.
When I did my first Burbank Comedy Festival,
Mm-hmm.
I got put in a show that he was hosting, and
Mm.
this was also during my suit era, so I was not at my
I
best.
am so disappointed I could not find a picture of that. I'm like
Oh, did I skip that?
heartbroken. It's
Oh,
gone.
darn.
You did such a good job. But it's so fun to have those moments on stage because you realize that like you can be on fucking television and then you're still on the same showcase with like people like us. Like I did a comedy festival in Canada last year, and there was someone there who won the Juno for Best Comedy Album, which is like their Grammys. And he was headlining a Sunday night showcase, or Saturday night showcase, sorry, at 10 p.m. that had 6 people in the audience, myself included. So this man is like the Canadian level of like as professional as you can be, and he was still there at the same show I was on. I was like, oh, okay, so we're all delusional about this.
Yeah.
We're all awful. So you were doing comedy for a long time, and you have done a few podcasts because you did the Dan and Mordecai show.
Yeah. I think the one I'm on is my 5th podcast.
Your 5th podcast. So I was able to find Dan and Mordecai, and there's Bad Faith Media. You are currently on your current podcast. So that's 3. What are the other 2?
So the first one was Dan Has Jokes.
Okay.
That's actually probably the most
Oh.
successful podcast I've ever had, because that was starting to get a really big following, and the whole thing was I would interview different comedians, and the first half would be regular interview, and the second half we would work on new joke ideas.
Was Tom Myers on that?
Yes.
Okay, because Tom
Myers was on that by request. I had so many people, including people who are not from Baltimore, but people from LA, begging me to do an episode.
When I travel, I get asked about him because he's like a sponge for SEO. Like everyone knows Tom.
Oh, yeah. To be clear, the Tom Myers episode of Dan Has Jokes was by far the most downloaded episode.
That's the one I can still find places. Like, because I was like, oh, okay, is this Dan or is this somebody else? Because with Tom, you never know really who's talking about him and why. And also, it was the same handle you have for your social media. So I was like, okay, maybe it's just another
That's where that all
Dan who has jokes. But
And speaking of Tom Myers and internet scrubbing, there's one video of myself that I cannot get off the internet because he recorded it and posted it to his YouTube channel. And every now and then he'll send me like, look at this comment that I got. And I'm like,
Tom,
I have no control over it.
I don't like this.
I know.
This is a PSA. Do not film other people and post it without their consent.
Well, I was hosting a show at Charm City Comedy Festival that he was in, and it was I was just whatever I said when I was introducing him. I guess I made some joke, and I said he had the laugh of a psychotic cartoon squirrel.
That sounds right.
He loved it. so
bless that man's heart. Very sweet. Love Tom.
He's a very nice guy.
Very nice man. Okay, so you've done now a series of podcasts, and you are currently on. I want to make sure I get the tagline right. Think harder, not smarter.
Yes.
2 comedians talk about life's big questions, even though they're probably not qualified to.
Yes.
So what questions do you think you are qualified to answer?
Oh, I don't know.
Just none of them? So therefore every question is unqualified?
What is Power BI? I can answer.
There we go.
My day job.
Your day job, not Power BI. That's different.
Power BI.
Every time I see that, though,
I am the Power BI at work.
You are the Power BI across the board. But yeah, think harder, not smarter. What is thinking harder about, and why is it not smarter? What's the summary?
Well, so the summary is me. The other host is Ryan Lina, who we also hosted Bad Faith Media together, and he's also a Baltimore comic, as I'm sure anyone seeing this will know. But I have a background in philosophy because that was part of my major in college, and I've always liked philosophy. I started studying it in high school, and then it's just been a thing that I have continued to read about a lot, and I've always wanted to do some kind of philosophy related project. So I think recently I was just kind of like, well, maybe, it does feel like more of a hobby podcast, if that makes sense.
I think every podcast is a hobby podcast because none of us are doing this for money.
Yeah, I guess that doesn't. But it is definitely the most cursed podcast I've ever worked on.
Really?
You have so many technology issues.
When I tell you, the episode I recorded with Bria Badu, happy belated birthday, Bria, love you so much. My fucking cat, who has been running around in the background of this for anyone watching it, jumped up on the computer mid-recording, turned the whole computer off, and almost lost the whole episode.
Oh my god.
Just, podcasts are cursed.
Yes. So we have our most recent episode, the first 20 minutes were recorded, and then I had just got set up Ryan with a new microphone because we've had so many issues with his. So
Yeah.
I was finally able to give him one, and we're like, oh, this one works great. And then 20 minutes in, his computer just disconnected him from our session, and
From
he
the
couldn't
call.
get back on.
God.
So I don't know. We're just cursed. So there will be more episodes. I don't know when. I don't know what kind of schedule. It's all dependent on
When you can
technology.
and what's fun about it. And I think part of it too, because I was on an episode of Bad Faith Media, the Veggie Tales one.
Yes,
And Bad Faith Media, for those who are not listeners or
that
aware,
was
was
podcast 4.
that was podcast 4. We're on number 5. 4 was reviewing faith-based media. That's bad, aka most faith-based media, if
Yes.
not all of it. And now you've moved to a more hobby-style, philosophical, answering questions about thinking harder, neither smarter.
Yeah.
How does it feel different to not really being like, okay, we're doing this week, we watched this thing, and we're going to talk about it, versus this like, oh, we're going to have this big question and really expound on it.
It's harder
Yeah.
because so Ryan, by the way, was super on board when I
Mm-hmm.
pitched the idea to him and I pitched it to him because I was like, I have this idea that I don't really know what this will be,
Yeah.
but Ryan's always like a good sport and on board. So I was like, what if we like talked, like picked different topics in philosophy and talked about them? And I asked him, what's your background in philosophy? He's like,
None.
I like,
I mean,
uh, so so we've still been trying to figure out like the format as we go.
yeah.
And a lot because a lot of it just winds up being me going off on these tangents and Ryan's be like, hey,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
That
then
makes
he
sense.
has whenever he like can grab onto something, he like, oh yes, and then he like
Yeah.
has really interesting things to say. We've talked a lot about it hasn't all been philosophy of religion, but a lot of it has been. But I there are plans to get someone else on to talk about some really fun math stuff.
Math stuff?
Like okay, so the one I really want to do an episode on is have you ever heard of the Monty Hall problem?
Different than Monty Python.
Yes.
Very different than Monty Python.
I
Okay,
think Monty
it like
Hall
rings
was
a bell, but
I think Monty Hall was a game show, but basically
okay.
it's this thing about there's 3 doors.
Oh, the 3 door
there's
problem.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whenever it's explained it sounds wrong.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's always explained incorrectly.
Yeah.
Then people always gaslight you. They're like, no, the correct answer is this. And you're like, that doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, it's because you don't know anything, you idiot. And it's like, I'm pretty sure. Well, this is why I want to get. There's a mutual friend of ours, Barry.
Oh yeah, Barry.
Barry. He has
Barry Wright of
Barry
High
Wright
Wire Improv.
of High Wire Improv,
Yes.
and he has a math background, and I want to get him on
Nice.
and see what he thinks about it. And I want to. I'm 100% sure Ryan has never heard the Monty Hall problem before, so.
I mean,
No, I'm sure he's heard a version of it.
Yeah.
But I would love to actually try to explain it in detail and watch his head explode, and then see what Barry thinks.
I am not gonna lie. I think I know about the concept in the same way, like you know about like the trolley problem.
Yeah.
But from it was in an episode of The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, that cartoon with the Grim Reaper from the mid-2000s,
Wow.
where they
that
talk
was-
about it.
I don't even know.
Exactly. It was very
It wasn't Power Rangers.
specific. It was not Power Rangers. But I think that's the thing about philosophy that makes it an interesting topic is because we all exist on philosophical axes. All these questions that philosophy brings up, all these conversations about it. It's not like what I do for work where it's like people don't interact with science and maps that often. Everyone exists in a philosophical state. So it makes a ton of sense that Ryan, even if he doesn't literally have an educational background in philosophy, responds to stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. This rocks. I understand.
Yeah,
what's
talking to him
this.
is great too because he is a very thoughtful person. And,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I never pitched it this way when we were talking about it, but in my head, did you ever listen to Car Talk? Do you know?
No, but I'm aware of it.
Yeah, I used to listen to Car Talk on NPR all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is what the show is or what it is aspiring to be, but in my head, I thought, oh, what if it was like Car Talk but for philosophy?
Yeah.
That would be really entertaining.
I think there's a market for it too, especially as society falls apart at its seams and we keep asking these bigger questions about who we are and what we're doing here and how we navigate this
Yeah.
space. Yeah.
And the other thing for me personally, especially when everything in the world gets crazy. There are certain things that I go back to that help keep me grounded,
Yeah.
and those get very personal.
Yeah.
But some of that ties back into some of the things that I grew up with,
Hmm.
and coming out of the church was very strange because I rejected a lot of what I grew up with.
Yeah.
But rejecting that was not a rejection of everything, and the things that I held on to are in a completely different framework now.
Yeah, exactly. They don't exist in the
Yeah.
context of the church system, but they still have value by
Yes. Yeah.
themselves.
And
So,
so even just figuring out how to talk about it has been a part of the challenge for me because sometimes when I hear myself talking about some things I believe,
yeah.
I have this like reflexive revulsion to it
Hmm.
where I'm like, oh, but then I'm like, but that's not
That's not a bad
what I
thing.
mean now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's coming out that way because you've probably talked about it before in that context. And like sometimes, I don't know if this is like a universal thing, but like I will hear my parents' voice come out of my mouth when I
Oh.
say certain things in certain ways. And it's like, oh, nothing I said was incorrect. And it was actually probably helpful,
Well,
but that doesn't mean I like it.
yeah, that's funny you mentioned that because I don't really know if I've heard my parents' voice come out of
Hmm.
me, but so the thing that I hate admitting about myself, which I have scrubbed from the internet, is that I used to work as a youth pastor,
Hmm.
and uh, and I don't like when I hear myself say something in a tone that I would have used in a youth pastor context.
What kind of youth pastor were you? Were you one of the? Oh,
Stressed out.
because every like youth like I was like a youth group kid. I went to a lock-in or two, big old CCDC kid. But like the stereotypical youth pastor is like, "Hey kids, you know that Sabrina Carpenter? I know another carpenter that's pretty cool. It's Jesus." So were you
Yeah.
that youth pastor?
No, 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 no. What's funny is, well, first of all, okay, full context, and I won't go too deep into this. I was very influenced by my youth pastor in high school, who was like a mentor to me for about 10 years.
Hmm.
And then he got fired.
Oh,
And something like that, well, you're like, oh, this person isn't who I thought they
they
were at
were
all.
someone who was a focal figure in my life as a
They
role
played
model.
a major role in
Yeah,
shaping what I thought I wanted to do with my life.
yeah.
And so looking back on my experience in youth group is very strange because one of the things that I liked about our youth group at the time was that it drew in a lot of people who felt like social outcasts
Right.
because there were other youth groups that we would interact with, and some of them were like, it's kind of funny in hindsight. It's like, oh, these were like all rich, popular kids. That's
Hmm.
why we didn't like them.
Hmm. Hmm.
We were because we literally were just a bunch of like social misfits.
Yeah, the leftover kid.
When I was a youth pastor, which in hindsight, by the way, even if I had never left the church, I was gonna quit
Being
doing
used.
ministry because
Yeah.
I couldn't. I was like, I'm not cut out for this,
Really?
and I didn't like being in a counselor role. I didn't
Oh,
feel like
wow.
uh, there's so much about it. It's shocking how much parents will just trust you. And I remember like in one church where I had to, I had a meeting where I like had all the parents and I'm like, listen, we need more adult volunteers because I cannot be alone with all of your kids because that's just not a good situation
No.
ever. And
No.
also you don't know me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why am I having to explain this to all of the parents? And but so I was always stressed out about stuff like that. And but the other thing is I was just not good at being an events coordinator or anything like that. But what I was good at and what I still do feel kind of some pride about is that I did wind up being good at connecting with kids who were like social misfits,
Yeah.
and it kind of was nice to be able to like that's they're not all bad memories, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I
Like
mean, it's a
yeah.
huge part of your life, and there's no way they could all be bad.
Yeah, and when you say it's a huge part of my life, that was one weird thing about walking away from that and then going
Yeah.
to Baltimore and doing comedy because I was always feeling like there's this whole part of my life that
Yeah.
doesn't even come up.
This
And
other me
yeah.
that's like in the background, and now it's come up specifically in two published books, two or
Yeah.
three, because I was able to find like an 88-page one on Amazon.
Yes, yeah.
But then there's the
Technically 3, but I only...
there's Politely Rejecting the Bible, which is available for sale at Walmart, which is insane.
But let me say this though,
Yeah.
because I know the first book is on there. I found out about this website
Oh yeah.
through Blue Sky, and it's really good. And I just want to get it right because I highly recommend it. I think it's all ebooks right now.
Ooh.
It is called Bookshop.
Bookshop. Okay.
.org, and it's all ebooks, but the whatever money they raise goes to help local bookstores.
Oh, cool.
And I know that my first book is on there.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if the second one's on there yet.
Okay.
So I don't know how that happened, but it's there.
So the first one then would be officially politely
rejecting the Bible.
Yes.
And the name, by the way, is from when. So I officially came to the realization that I'm not really a Christian anymore.
Yeah.
I still had a semester and a summer course left to go at seminary. And I was like, well, I had a full scholarship at that point because I was a good student. And I was like, well, I don't know what I'll ever use this degree for, but I'm so close to the end that it would feel almost unbearable to
if
not
I just
finish.
did not finish it, yeah.
But I didn't want to tell anybody. I told my ex-wife and I told a couple of close friends.
Yeah.
And then I didn't tell anybody else until after I graduated. So that last semester was one of the most insane, uncomfortable.
Yeah, I feel like you're
things.
living undercover, essentially.
So one of the things I did to keep myself sane was I started a blog called Politely Rejecting Jesus.
Okay.
The blog no longer exists, but I still have the URL. And that's where the title came from. And so then I was like, I guess I'll use that for the books.
And then that book came out in 2022.
It was December 21, I think.
21, okay.
Yeah. Because I started... I had been doing a lot of writing, obviously for the blog, and then after we moved to Baltimore and I was doing a lot of writing, and I wound up writing a whole manuscript that was, I think, like 140,000 words.
Oh my God.
That was it. It was called Politely Rejecting Jesus, and it was like everything that I had to say, and I was going to try to publish it, and then for reasons, I decided that was not a good time to publish.
Yeah.
Which is great because it was 140,000 words, and
yeah,
and also it was kind of like stale. In hindsight,
the hard part with the topics, and we'll get into this after the break when we dive into the book. But the almost oppressive barrier that theology. That's really hard to say. Theology presents, because I feel like people understand religion at a very innate personal level, but there's a lot of theology that is very technical and very specific and almost historically referential in the same way other historians talk about other books. So I could totally understand how like you can build up that many words because you're trying to comprehend it.
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh, this is dense as hell.
Well, also, yeah, because part of that was even if like I had this in mind when I was doing the blog and when I started writing, it was like, even if I never try to self-publish or anything, I need to have this written down for my own sake because it was weird because I, like, from childhood, I was very strongly encouraged about, oh, you're a very intelligent young man. And
a bright young man.
You have the gift of wisdom.
Uh-huh.
And I was very encouraged with that. And that was one of the reasons why a lot of people pushed me to go into ministry. People regarded me as, like, a teacher. Even when I was in high school, a lot of other students looked up to me for that and would come to me with questions and stuff. It was a weird role to be in.
Yeah.
And so it was like this responsibility that you have. Well, you're going into ministry, you have to think really hard about this now. And so I did, and then everything sort of fell apart. And when I started talking to people about it, some close friends or professors or whatever, I would show them like, hey, can I show you something? And just like, this doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, what's happening here?
People would always react like, yeah,
that's a hard one. There's a doozy.
And I'd be like, well, that's kind of a big deal. And then after I started telling people that I wasn't a Christian anymore, I'm not going to be a pastor, I'm not going to be part of the church anymore, and that spread pretty quickly in a small town area.
Yeah.
The reactions were all, oh, you were reading too much, or you're thinking too much.
Yeah.
Or, oh, it was that liberal seminary that you went to. And I was like, you all encouraged me to use my
To read and learn.
so
And now I did it too much?
and yeah, and no one wanted to hear. Almost nobody, I should say. There were a
Yeah.
couple people who did take time, including one of my cousins. My I won't get into this. My family's like actual fundamentalist, like scary fundamentalist.
Yeah.
And one of my cousins is a fundamentalist pastor, and he's one of the only people who actually took time to have a long, very nice conversation with me, and we emailed.
Okay.
And he was great.
Yeah.
And it's so strange that
from him specifically.
but yeah, a lot of people were just like just so dismissive so quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so did you not mean all of these encouraging things that you said? Because if there was someone who I regarded as very intelligent and then they suddenly turned around and said, hey, this doesn't make sense, I would at least want to know,
like, hear them out a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, let's cook on this a bit.
So writing all this stuff out for me was helpful because I have anxiety issues, and it's helpful to go back and like
confirm your reality.
like, this is why I came to that conclusion.
Yeah. I feel that with my anxiety a lot too, where it's just like, okay, I need like a track record of what has happened here to prove that I am not like imagining this. I need to like actively have a record so it all makes sense. So that's resulted in 2 separate books now, 3 books, and we will be talking about the newest book. But first, we're gonna take a break.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
Yeah. Hey everybody, welcome to The Break. This is the part of the show where we talk about upcoming events at our host venue, the Club Car. So this coming Friday, March 21st, it is Bear Night, not to be missed, always a great time. And on March 22nd, Baltimore's very own Ivana Pizza is hosting the cast and campers of Camp Wanakiki. Summer camp is in fact a drag, a camp comedy show coming to the Club Car. That is on March 22nd. Pre-sale tickets are $10, so get yours now. Other than that, please make sure to get your tickets for March 29th for Laugh Tracks. That is at the Club Car. All the information are on our social media page. Only other thing is that we will be re-releasing the Kenny Rooster episode remastered. There was some issues with upload last time, so stay tuned for a fresh, uncut version of that. Until then, we'll get back to Dan Kapr. We are back here on Train of Thought talking to author Dan Kapr about politely rejecting Jesus.
That should be, I feel like it quotes author.
Author. You've written more. You literally have a published book. It's right here. I can hold it. It's specifically here. So say I'm in the Barnes and Nobles, right? And like I'm perusing, I've gotten lost on my way to the manga, and I run across this, and I pick it up.
If you ran across this at a Barnes and Noble, would be the happiest day of my life. I don't know that will.
But if you're in the Barnes and Nobles and I pick this up because it's such a lovely cover and beautifully bound book, I'd be like, oh my god, this is so nice. And you'd be like, actually, that's me. And I'd be like, oh, cool, what's it about?
Okay, so this one, which is called Politely Rejecting Jesus, is basically in as reasonably short amount of space as I can to just lay out all of the main reasons for why I went from believing that Jesus was God to not believing that Jesus was God. And there's other reasons why that factored into me not being a Christian anymore, but this is all specifically related to what I used to believe about Jesus.
Right.
And there's a little bit of autobiography in there, but it's not really an autobiography. It's just, it talks a lot about the Gospels and the history behind them, and why I don't think that there's stuff that Jesus says that I still agree with quite a bit.
Yeah.
He's Jesus, you know.
He's known for saying a lot of things.
But there is things that he says that I find to call his credibility as a spokesperson for God into question, much less as someone who is supposed to actually be God.
Right.
And so a lot of the book is about that, and then a few of the chapters are responding to different arguments that have been used in favor of the idea that Jesus is someone we should worship. And one of the big ones is the historical argument for, that he rose from the dead.
Yeah.
Which was a big part of my belief system when I was growing. Well, not when I was growing up, when I was in college and after. So
yeah, the resurrection.
Yeah,
and all that vibes. I mean, again, I was raised Catholic, so there's a lot of like latent Jesusisms inside of me. And to honor that, before we dive into the context of the book a bit, I'm going to play a little game.
Okay, yes.
In honor of Keke Palmer's famous Vanity Fair interview, we're going to call it Sorry to This Man. So I'm going to show you a series of men.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me who they are and politely reject them.
Okay. Okay.
So, Dan,
I'm afraid I'm going to not know who most of them are.
Dan, who is this man?
Oh, well, that's like anime Jesus.
Okay. And can you politely reject him?
Yeah, I've never been that big into anime.
That's valid.
But you know, I know a lot of my friends are.
Okay. So, can you tell me who this man is?
That's Marvel Jesus.
Okay. And can you politely reject him?
Yeah, you know, I stopped reading comic books when I was in college, and I don't know that he's really going to work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, to be honest.
No. The Passion of the Christ crossover would just not be...
It would be a nice change of pace where the way that the hero wins is by dying.
Yeah.
But then it's kind of cheating to have them come back.
I mean, they did that with Iron Man. Now he's going to be Doctor Doom.
So yeah.
He's Tony Stark.
I know, as I was saying that, I was like, no. No.
They did that. Can you tell me who this man is?
Oh my god. This is probably one of the funniest Jesus paintings I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. This is the one where I'm sure people have seen this one of the man shooting drugs into his arm. But it's not just his arm, it's also Jesus' arm, because in some kind of Cronenbergian body horror, they are one person. The
substance is the body of the Christ.
And so when you inject something into your veins, you're actually injecting it into Jesus' veins. So and I'm sorry to Jesus for his blood sugar level. That's the contribution I've made.
That's rough. Okay, we got one last one. Can you tell me who this man is?
That is me.
Yeah.
I was on a podcast. Basically, it was an improvised podcast. Mm-hmm. Do you know Trisha Crimmins?
No. I know Trish Smart, but not Trisha Crimmins.
Trisha Crimmins. I actually don't remember how it was someone I knew through social media, and so she was in New York City. I don't really know her very well. I'm not sure if I've ever met her in person. I think she's a comic, but I know she does improv. And anyway, so yeah, this improv podcast where the premise is that God and the devil are interviewing you. Exit interview.
Hey, that's what it's called. Exit interview.
That's the name of the podcast. And you are whatever character you end up being, and the premise is that you've just died, and now God and Satan are interviewing you to figure out how you lived your life and where you're going to end up. And yeah, that was the episode I did, which was actually, I had done another episode with them that was lost. They lost all the recording.
Podcasts.
So they had me, on again, and I wound up becoming like king of the cat underworld or something.
God Norman Smith holding this cat. So I was like, that is not your cat. Who is that?
No.
So I want you to politely reject that cat specifically.
Sorry, buddy. I already got a cat.
Yeah, I was going to say.
She's a handful.
Cheating on May out here. So that has been Sorry to This Man. We just had to go through a bunch of pictures of Jesus I found on the internet that I thought were funny.
That's not funny. Yeah, when they posted that drawing on Instagram, I lost my mind.
It's so funny. I love the arm. Like, where were your footsteps on the beach in your arm doing heroin?
The footsteps on the beach is one of my favorite.
It's a classic.
It's one of my favorite lingering, like, I don't know what to call it. It's like religious detritus.
Terrible.
It's not from the Bible. It's not from it. It's just
mental junk mail.
It's just some random weird poem that somebody wrote, and that was on every classroom wall when I was growing up.
Bookmark, Christian bookstore. So back to books. We were talking about humor, actually, and I feel like this is a good transition. So the book itself is actually, because I've been reading through it, and I am not a theologist. I was raised Catholic, so I understand religion, but I'm not considered an expert. I've never read the Bible, but I will say it does feel very accessible as a piece of literature because of your voice and your humor. So how do you kind of like balance the like difficulties of the subject material being a little dense and dusty and stale, as we said, versus like injecting some life into it. And it's like, okay, there's actually like some vibe here. It feels like I'm listening to someone talk versus someone read off something.
Yeah, I'm actually glad to hear that because that was something I was not sure about
Mm-hmm.
how it would come across. So the first thing I wrote like 10 years ago, which was very long, was also very boring in my opinion. And then I want to say 2019, I was trying to, I think it was 2019, it might have been after. I was trying to do, it was my first attempt at what wound up being the first book. And I wrote a whole manuscript, but my approach was, what if it was a comedy book? And then it also had some interesting things in there.
Yeah.
And that, it turns out the answer is it's very annoying. And it's, it's
Yeah.
it's very annoying and very obnoxious, and I did not like the way I sounded.
Yeah, because you don't want to be like, I know you're not an atheist, or specifically a theist, but there's like a whole genre of like religion culture that's like interrogating and talking about religion, but it comes off as like angry atheist or like the fedora bro, where it's like
Yeah,
kind of like
it,
snotty about it.
it's hard not to like veer into that too.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I don't know if this is just me, but this is why I was like, I think I need to tone down all these stupid jokes. Is because if you're actually interested in a discussion about something and you're following an argument, if a punchline suddenly comes up, it can be funny, but it can like just completely derail you.
It's disorienting.
And I think it might be because of like a left brain, right brain thing, where
Yeah.
you're like using one part of your brain to follow something, and suddenly now you've just been like forced to the other part of your brain is coming in.
Exactly.
That's my scientific analysis.
I mean, that makes a ton of sense because it's like people who, in like a work conference, I was at a conference this week, and they're talking about like very high level technical terms, and then they're like trying to put a joke in there, and it falls flat because no one's expecting a joke, and
I
it's
love when
usually
people.
bad.
I love when really like stuffy academic people try to do a joke.
Mhm.
I actually think that's so much funnier than if the joke lands. It's just watching someone because they're human, they're trying to be funny, and the fact of watching them bomb in a context
Yeah.
that doesn't really have anything to do with comedy anyway is so funny to me.
It's so funny in like this very dark way where I'm saying like, oh no.
So one thing
Oh,
about
no.
me is, so back when I was still doing ministry, I did a lot of preaching. I actually had about a decade of public speaking experience before I started stand up.
Mhm.
And I really always wanted to do comedy, but then I never really felt like I could. Whenever I preached, I would always try to do jokes, and they would always bomb.
Yep.
Always bomb.
Yep.
And it was always embarrassing. And then yeah, it was funny in hindsight after I left and everything and started doing comedy. I'm like, oh, this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's always been there. I should have
This.
just done this. So something that also stood out to me in the beginning is the usage of politely, because it comes up in the last book and this as well, where you specifically kind of go for a tone of not debunking or not decrying or not denouncing anything that's happening here, but this is a polite rejection. You specifically did that to avoid people digging their heels into their beliefs and having a conversation versus an argument.
Yeah, ideally.
Yeah.
And for the record, I think there is a place for just like insulting,
Insulting, debunking,
depending,
yeah,
or attacking. You know, if you're criticizing, if you've got say like a church sex scandal,
yeah, that's
it's
not
it's
something to polite
appropriate
about.
to criticize the
Yeah.
people. But so I did not start because of the way I grew up. I was not really encouraged to read things that did not align with our values. And so it wasn't until college that I started actually reading stuff written by atheists. Which, for the record, I'm not an atheist. But when I first started reading atheist books, it felt so scandalous.
Exactly. It's like,
Which is funny because the first atheist I ever read was Michael Martin, who is this philosopher, not an obnoxious writer at all. And he edited the Cambridge Companion to Atheism. So I think the first book I ever read about atheism was by him, and it was Atheism, a Philosophical Justification. I think that's what it was called. Very boring. And it was good. It was helpful to read. And at the time, I was very sheltered, so it was very scary to read. And then there was my senior year of college. I took a religion class, and we had to read The End of Faith by Sam Harris.
yeah,
entirely different tone. Harris says a lot of. He's a very reactionary person,
Yeah.
and yeah, there's a line in that book that I still remember, I think verbatim, which is that some propositions are so dangerous that it may even be ethical to kill people for believing them. And I, I remember thinking, well, that's not cool. Like, there's a lot of propositions I think are crazy, but I'm not going to kill
Yeah.
somebody for
For
like
just believing it.
that's.
Yeah, versus acting on it.
And
Yeah.
then after college, started reading Richard Dawkins,
Yeah.
and Dawkins is such a classic example of someone who knows his field really well, and then when he gets outside of his field, he's an absolute
Ass.
terror.
Yeah.
And so the God Delusion is a horrible book, and
Yeah.
but yeah, for me, what that did was it really stuff like that really made me feel defensive because you see things that you believe being misrepresented and made fun of, and
Yeah. Attacked.
there's a whole online culture that gets behind it, and so it's like, well, I must have the truth. Then I must be on the side of truth. I got to defend it, and it took me a long time to kind of work through all of my defenses. And,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, it is. What's funny is my blog, which again no longer exists. I was processing a lot of anger,
Mm-hmm.
and so even though I called it politely rejecting Jesus because I was trying to do that, some of it came off as very
A
obnoxious.
very a bit impolite. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was that was just part of like working through my own stuff.
And it's part of the journey when it comes to this sort of work. Like, I remember reading The God Complex when I was in high school and just thinking, like, oh, wow, we're really talking about this. We're doing it. And then, like, have you seen Heretic yet?
Not yet, no.
It felt like your most annoying atheist friend from high school lecturing you because your parents make you go to church. There's this whole long, like, Monopoly allegory in the movie
Okay.
that just goes on forever. And it's kind of, it feels very dismissive and just kind of like, oh, you're so stupid for believing this. It's not about what you believe, it's that you are stupid for believing it.
What I can't stand is when the debate is presented as if, well, your choices are either creationism, like you don't believe in evolution, or you're an atheist. And
Yeah.
It's like, that's so stupid. Come on.
No, there's this whole world of possibilities between the two.
So yeah, and then I mean, people can do really funny comedy
Mm-hmm.
with such a narrow view of stuff like that, and it
Yeah.
can be funny, but also yeah, it can make you feel defensive.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the humor comes from because it's so transgressive, and it's like, oh, we are being attacking of something that's considered so sacred,
Yeah.
literally sacred, and therefore it comes humorous because you're like, oh my god, they're doing this. It's like when your parents, like, one of them makes fun of the other, and like, oh, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard because they are doing something that I thought was never possible.
Oh, is
They're
that a
doing-
thing parents do?
Well, my parents do it, and I'm learning that maybe that might not be an everyone thing. So this might be a hard left pivot, but
Okay.
something that stood out about the book, both in the foreword and in the author's credits in the
Oh
beginning,
yeah.
and in the back specifically, is that this book does not use AI generated content, and I think we both agree specifically on how AI is an actual absolute garbage fire, philosophically, environmentally, and artistically. But what about it felt so critical to you to put it sort of on the back, on the front of this book, especially for a topic that does not have anything to do with
Yeah,
AI?
yeah. I still debate whether or not I needed to say anything in the preface. I think that might have been overkill, but so one of the reasons why I was like I feel like I should say something is because the book is self-published,
Yeah.
and I've just been seeing so much lately about how many people are using AI to write their books for them.
That's insane. Why
And-
write a book then?
And then there was this there's a picture, oh man, I don't think I still have the picture, of these guys who started a quote unquote publishing company, and their goal was to put out something like 60,000 books in a year. And, it's like, oh, we're going to disrupt the writing industry. And it's like, and first of all, we know that this just steals content from actual writers.
Yeah,
so
this is not a secret.
it's unethical. It's unethical because it's dangerous to the environment.
Yeah.
Even though I think there is, use for artificial intelligence in certain contexts.
Yeah.
but the environmental thing is a big concern for me.
And AI is an umbrella term. Like it means because there's like language learning models and then like generative image AI and like I use machine learning at work a lot of the times, but that is considered AI. But the whole AI umbrella
Yeah,
is people using it to disrupt industries that don't need to be disrupted.
I know. And the reason why I wanted to have it on my cover somewhere, and I was like, let me make it as obvious as possible,
Yeah.
is because I am someone who would be hard pressed to pick up a self published book to begin with.
Yeah.
Which I have done it before. I've bought self published books, but knowing that a lot of people will be using AI to write them makes me less inclined to
Right.
want to read them. So I wanted to make it obvious. It's also in the book description online if you read the blurb, and I just wanted to be very clear that like, hey, if you read this for better or worse. This is my own stuff that I wrote,
Yeah.
and if it's bad, it's because I am bad.
Book ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. It was more just like if I were the reader, I would want to know that I was not reading AI slop.
Especially about something so personal. Like,
Yes.
you are in this book, your voice shines through, and to have any shade of doubt that, like, oh yeah, I also just ran this through ChatGPT just to spice it up feels like such a disservice to the amount of work that went into this.
Also, no AI used in the cover design.
Yes.
Uh,
Boom.
not that. I mean, it is what it is. I like this cover design better than with the first book where
Yeah.
I tried to hire someone to do my first cover. This is when I was living in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And I had money set aside for it, and the reason why I ended up not doing it is literally because I wound up I was like, oh okay, I've got two people who might be able to do it, and I was talking to each of them. And then I was looking at their portfolios, and they each were claiming the same cover. And I was like, well, one of them is lying to me. I don't even know how to go about figuring out who's telling the truth. I'll just do it in Canva. And I'm not. I was always like a little bit like I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not really a great designer, but unless it's in Power BI.
I mean, some of the best books ever are just words on the cover.
Yes,
you know. So, but I think this gets the message across. It has the title in your name, and it's all centered correctly. Like that's my biggest pet peeve. Is just like, why is it off to the left a little bit?
Yeah,
I want to die. But
my brother used to work for a long time in the Mount Rushmore gift shop.
Really?
So there's this whole fascinating world of the companies that run the gift shops in like national parks and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll see a lot of books that look self-published and
Yeah.
everything. My brother said that people would just come into the store and then like just kind of like sneak
Leave
up
them.
and leave their book on a shelf.
Yeah.
And so then they would have to find them and be like, well, we can't sell these.
Yeah.
And he sent me a book once he found it was someone wrote this really thick really thick biography of Bill Hicks. And it was tied in. It was like this, like sort of spiritual biography of Bill Hicks. And my brother was like, "Do you want this?" And I was like, "Yes,
Yes, please."
And it was so great. It had the introduction or the preface at the end, and it was just like very dense Times New Roman font. Hardly any margins. It was wild. I don't have it anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, and for some reason, it had a picture of Bill Hicks as a young child. It was like it was like his first grade class picture or something. It was such a weird book. So I don't know. Maybe someday I'll write a book like that.
Maybe someday you two could be on the bookshelves illegally of the Mount Rushmore gift shop.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if you are not currently on the bookshelves of the Mount Rushmore gift shop, where can people pick up Politely Rejecting Jesus?
Okay, so I'm not a fan of Amazon or any big companies, but you can get it on Amazon.
Yeah.
There's a paperback and an ebook. You can get it on Barnes and Noble, and there are a lot of online stores where you can find it, but I don't know what all of them are.
Yeah.
You can probably just do a search for the title and see what comes up. And I am working on finishing up the audiobook,
Yeah.
which I've not been able to put out yet. So I've never done an audiobook before, so I once it's done, it will be on Audible.
Okay.
I don't know if there will be a way to make it available anywhere else because
Yeah.
I've never done an audiobook before, but
where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
And so many people put up audio. I got a suggestion for an audiobook that's just about having sex with minotaurs, and that was like the first thing Spotify suggested to me.
That's what my next book is going to be about.
I've never
is,
even read a book like that.
politely rejecting a minotaur that one night.
That one time, but the next time, politely rejecting minotaurs on the first date. Second date, however, free
I
range.
kissed dating minotaurs goodbye.
So they can find them Barnes and Nobles and other places books are sold. Audiobooks on the way. Is there anything else you want people to know? Anything they want to have on the radar? I know you're not really shit posting these much these days. If you want to plug any socials, mostly just for pictures of May.
Yeah, I mean, I post pictures of my cat on Instagram sometimes. I'm still at Dan Has Jokes on Instagram. I'm on Blue Sky.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
At Dan Kapr. Blue Sky, I don't really know what I'm doing on there.
None of us do. We're all doing our best on there is what we're doing.
Sometimes I post jokes and sometimes I will post my, like, I'll be, like, freaking out about something and then I'll delete it, like, 5 minutes later. So if you're quick enough...
See?
You can see some of my meltdowns.
So make sure to follow now on Blue Sky. It's where the party is. The more people that are there, the more people that'll validate my existence. Yeah. So I think we're about at the end. So Dan, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we'll be having episodes Wednesdays when I feel like it. Until then, listen to our past episodes and I will talk to everybody later. Boom.